Hi there. My name is Jennifer Bewersi, one of the co-founders of Music for Inbox, and today we're going to have an artist chat with our visual artist this month, Seren Sensei. So I am going to invite her now, and always takes me a second. And let's see, there we go. Seren created our visual art for this month, and we're just really excited to have her. Hey!
Hi!
How are you?
I'm doing excellent. How are you doing?
Very good. It's so good to talk to you. We're like beyond excited about your piece this month. It's so perfect, and we're really just so grateful. So, and thanks for making the time to chat with us too.
Yes, no problem. Thank you for having me. Let me just adjust in my light.
I know. Yeah, it's trickier at nighttime with the light. Well, I wanted to maybe start with kind of explaining. We met you through the Human Resources Time Space Money Residency, where you
Yes.
were presenting two films, I believe, the
Yes.
Black Americans Extras, Detroit, and 5 Years Since Ferguson. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Um, and we met at this like picnic afterwards, and you were telling us all about your work. And I was wondering if you could share now what kind of things you work on and how you came to the kind of films you create and the art you make.
Yes. So it's funny. I feel like I always tell people that I kind of feel like I sort of like backdoor entered my way into art, because I had initially got into activism. I had started in 2012 with Occupy Wall Street, which was like an anti-capitalism movement, and that was sort of how I got into activism because I was living in New York at that time, and that was kind of like ground zero for Occupy Wall Street. And I was really, really curious about Occupy and the Occupy movement. And I started going down to where they had their encampment set up, and I started attending protests, and I just got really involved in activism that way. And then that same year was also the year that Trayvon Martin was killed. And 2 years later, in 2014, Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson. And I just sort of like snapped. I was just like, okay, I have to do something. Like, I just have to do something. I don't know what it is, but I have to do something. And so I went to Ferguson to protest. And the footage that ended up being in my 5 years since Ferguson documentary, which I completed in 2019, was primarily a lot of the footage from when I was there protesting in 2014. And I also, in 2014, started doing YouTube. I started doing YouTube. I started doing video essays. And how I got into that was I was very, very active on Tumblr. I know people are going to be like, Tumblr? Like, I was super active on Tumblr. I was really involved in fandom and stuff like that on Tumblr. And I had started writing essays. A lot of them were about race. They were about capitalism. They were about sociopolitical issues, issues for Black Americans. And a lot of the essays, people were like, oh, have you ever thought about doing a YouTube or doing like a video format? Because they were like very long. A lot of them were like really, really long posts. And so a lot of people were like, oh, did you ever think about doing YouTube and maybe doing video essays, doing like video format? And I was like, oh, no, not really, but whatever. Like, I'll give it a try. And I used to say that I was like the anti-YouTube YouTuber. Like, I didn't do any editing, like no fancy editing, like no, I didn't know anything about video content. I didn't know anything about like digital art or anything. I was using like the camera on my computer. So like my old videos are like the worst quality, like that joke where they say like you filmed on a potato, like that's how like a lot of my old videos look, literally like I filmed them on a potato. But I just like, it was like a really good outlet for me. I would just like sit in front of the computer and just like say what was on my mind. Like, my videos also were not scripted, which in 2014 this was like a big thing, having like fully scripted videos, fully edited videos. YouTube was like really against long form content at that time. They wanted everything to be sort of like short and like sweet and funny. And I was doing like, 45-minute long, like unedited, uncut, like rant videos. But people really liked the videos, and they resonated with a lot of people. And a lot of people also liked the fact that they weren't overly edited and like overly scripted and like overly done. And I just kept on doing them, and my channel grew, and that grew into I also was still writing essays, and I got the opportunity to write some really cool pieces for some really cool organizations and publications. And then as I was continuing doing my videos on YouTube, I kind of started like branching out and wanting to do more different types of video content instead of just my sort of standard video essays. So I started doing a series on Black women in history, and that was really, really fun. And then I got this idea to do this documentary series called The Black Americans, which we had spoken about, where I basically travel by car across the country, and I sit down with Black Americans and just have conversations. And a lot of that was inspired by post 2016. I saw a lot of media coverage after Donald Trump got elected, where they're talking about, the Rust Belt and the Dust Belt and the Bible Belt, and this is how he got elected, and this is how these people feel. And I was just like, I mean, like, you're in Pittsburgh, like, you're not talking to any Black people. Like, I know there's a lot of Black Americans that live there. Like, you're in Cleveland, like, you're in the South, like, you're not talking to any Black people. Like, you're not talking to any Black Americans. Like, how do the Black Americans feel about this? And so I decided to just like travel across the country and just start talking to people. And I kind of still did it in my own style. Like, I still do it pretty unedited. I just let people talk. I let people say whatever they want to say. They can curse. We could take shots. They can, I just want people to feel comfortable. And so they can just say whatever they want to say. And so I did the first season of that in 2018. So obviously it was pre-COVID. And then I did the second season in 2019, but it was midway through 2019. So it was also pre-COVID. And the first two seasons, I was also able to put together some really good events. I called them like public conversations. And I always thought of that as like almost like performance art in a way. Because even though I feel like for a lot of us, we think of art as something that's like staged, but there was something that just felt really good and organic about getting groups of people together in a real space, in a real life space, not online where we're hiding behind anonymity, where we're hiding behind keyboards and people can just say whatever, but like in a real life space, we're going to talk face to face, and we're going to talk about how Black Americans feel, and we're going to talk about our issues, and we're going to talk about, just whatever you guys want. I worked with some really great Black women-owned independent bookstores for that in New York. And the events were really, really great and really successful. And then COVID happened and I was at home, sort of like everybody else. I had already kind of planned a season 3, but season 3 has to be postponed indefinitely. It's just now rolling out, which I'm really, really happy about. So I was like, okay, well, I can't do Black Americans because I can't travel and I can't talk to people face to face like I really want, and I can't get people together like I really want. So maybe I can do something else or like get into something else. And so that was when I kind of started experimenting around with like digital art and video art. I was going through a lot of the footage from 2014 when I was in Ferguson, and I ended up, and when I was filming season 2 of the Black Americans, I went to Ferguson again. And so that was my second time in Ferguson. That was my first time I had been there since the protest, and it had been 5 years. So I was like, oh, maybe I can put something together for 5 years since Ferguson, the 5-year anniversary, something like that. And I just started like messing around with the clips, and I really liked this format of doing like loops, what I call like video loops, where I just kind of like loop images. And I applied for the residency, the time, space, money residency, which luckily they allowed me to do like fully remote because I was doing like digital work. I didn't have to like go anywhere. And with the support of the residency, I was able to put the film together. And I was also able to work on, because I have a mini series under the Black Americans that's called Extras. And the extras are just kind of like little short clips that are specifically about the culture of the city that I'm in. So I normally start off by asking my interviewer. So like for the Detroit one, it starts off, what is Detroit culture? So I ask them like, what is Detroit culture? And then it's funny because like 9 times out of 10 after I say it, they repeat back to me like, what is Detroit culture? Like, what is Detroit culture? And then they start like talking, and they just talk about like, it's this, I think it's that, I think it's this, I think it's that, it's this food, it's this dance we like to do, it's this place we like to go. And so I also did a clip on for the extras Detroit as a part of the residency as well. And I showed both pieces as a video installation at Actual Size Gallery in LA, which was super, super cool because even though it was kind of like during the peak of like lockdown and COVID, it was fully visible from the outside. And it just showed on like a 24-hour loop, like in a loop and a loop. And that was the first time I ever did anything like that. And I really, really, really enjoyed it. And I just started kind of messing around with like more digital art and sort of like digital collages, and creating these sort of video loops. And the backbone of what I do still revolves around like Black American culture and a lot of my memories, I would say, and also like other people's memories, like collective consciousness, because, you know, it's really interesting. Like when I'm in a city and I'm talking to different types of people and I ask them, you know, well, what would you say is the culture of this city? A lot of those people are going to say very similar things. Like, you know, oh, we're in Detroit. If I ask 5 people, probably at least 3 of those people are going to say like, oh, drinking Fago or something, which is like a certain type of soda. So, cause I'm also like really into like, what do the people eat here? Like, what do we like to eat? Like, what are the types of sodas that we like to drink? Again, like what type of like dances do the people like to do here? What is like the music? I'm really into like regionality. What is the slang here? What are the superstitions here? Like, tell me about what it was like for you growing up here. And also during lockdown, I found that, and this kind of like led me into the project that I did with you guys, because I also found during lockdown, something that was like really, really calming for me was doing a lot of things and playing a lot of games from my childhood. So like I'm an only child, and like a card game that my mom taught me how to play was Free Cell, which people usually play Free Cell on the computer, but my mom taught me how to play Free Cell like with a deck of cards. So I play Free Cell, I play Solitaire, but I personally prefer Free Cell. So I would play Free Cell for like hours, like just like sometimes I'd switch it up and play Solitaire for fun, but like I would sit at a table and play Free Cell for hours. Or I got like really back into paper crafts. I've always done a lot of paper crafts. My grandmother's super, super crafty. So I would do like all different types of paper airplanes. I would create fortune tellers, which I hadn't made in like 10 years. And I just found that it was really calming for me. It was something that it occupied my hands. It let my mind wander. I'm not thinking about COVID. I'm really not thinking about anything. I'm just like, I'm dealing the cards. I'm folding the paper. I'm licking the paper. I'm cutting the paper. I'm writing. You know, it was just something that was really calming for me and kind of like gave me a lot of that, I would say, I guess, the feeling and the memory and the like reflection time of like when I used to kind of like play those games as a child. But it's very interesting doing that type of stuff also as an adult.
Yeah.
Because like you're an adult now, like you're not a kid anymore. So you're not in the same space as when you were a kid and you're creating fortune tellers and you're writing, you know, the most simplest stuff in the fortune tellers of like, I'm going to grow up and like, I'm going to live in a mansion. And, you know, like the options are like, are you going to live in a mansion, a house, you know, a this or a that? Like, oh, I'm going to live in a mansion. I'm going to like work this job. I'm going to have like 2 kids. So I started also thinking about as an adult, and most of us as adults, when we think about the future, we think about the future totally different than when we were children. So I was like, well, what would be some of the fortunes that I would put in a fortune teller as an adult? And then I kind of started like messing around with that concept as well. And it just kind of like it grew into this project. And I still have some other concepts that I still am working with, kind of within like the parameters of this. I was playing a lot of like hand games with my friends, things that I hadn't played since I was a child. And I was just doing a lot of reflecting on like games and like childhood and like memory during that time, and turning that into like visual art. So, but yeah, like I didn't go to art school. I never really thought about doing art. I never even really thought about doing video content. I sort of came to it in my own way, kind of through YouTube and through activism and through all this kind of stuff. And so it's been really fun. It's been really good. I love art too, because art to me just feels like really pure expression. I've always considered myself a writer my whole life. I've always written nonfiction, written essays. I've written fiction, short stories. I also had a residency for a screenplay during lockdown, so I was working on that at the same time. But like, I'm like a very strict, hard on myself writer. I feel like most writers are perfectionists. So I feel like most writers are like, like we torture ourselves. Like, this has to be perfect. This line has to be perfect. I have to do this. I have to do that. When I'm doing like visual art and art crafts, paper crafts, digital art, my video loops, my digital collages, all that stuff, I don't feel the need for it to be perfect. I'm just trying to like express or like capture the feeling of like how this made me feel when I was a child, or like how this made me feel like growing up in DC, or like how this made me feel. And I'm just trying to like express that. It's like a totally different form of expression, which I think is also why I kind of like gravitated a lot towards lockdown, because I was just like, I just can't take this pressure of like writing right now. Like I need something relaxing. Like I need something that I can just like express how I'm feeling, and that's it. And so the art kind of just started happening naturally that way. Imposter syndrome is real when you're a writer. Yes.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's so lucky for us that timing worked out, because the video music piece this month is how to assemble, and we were really kind of thinking about that question about assembling, and the piece it's based on is a collage of instruction manuals that are like how to assemble a saxophone and a computer, and it's really playful and sweet. But when you kind of ask yourself that question, how to assemble, and it's been such a present question over the past year and a half with how do we gather together as people. And when we asked ourselves, like, who else is thinking about assembly, who's thought about like creating, coming together, or and you came to mind as a lot of it because of the docuseries you do, and how you go and you make space and you bring these stories and people together. So we emailed you. We're like, hey, would you be into this project?
Yes, and it's so, like I said, I know you guys are probably like, wow, you came up with that idea fast. Like, I literally emailed you guys like the same day. Like, well, I've actually been working on this project with like these fortune tellers. So this is something you guys would be interested in, because it's just been kind of like percolating in my mind for a while. Yeah.
It was so perfect. And so you actually have, so we can like show people. So your piece is called How to Assemble a Future, which when you kind of like pitch that idea, like fortune tellers and assembling the future, like we were so pumped about it, because it's such a great, like, kind of, let's dig deep into this question, not just like how do we reflect on assembly over time or instructions, but like this idea of assembling the future. So it's a paper fortune teller that people get in the mail, and it comes in like an envelope like this. And so you have the kind of paper fortune teller, and then you assemble it, which I love, by the way, that people have to themselves.
Yes,
but, genius.
And when you said that, the way that it works is you guys send out like a flat thing and you mail it out, and I was like, oh, this would be perfect for that, because you can mail it out and then they put it together.
Yeah.
So yeah, it ends up working out. Yay!
The fortune teller.
And I don't know, I just love these. I love paper fortune tellers. They're just, I don't know, they're really visceral for me, and they just like really remind me of being a kid.
Yeah, it's I mean, the second you kind of do this motion, you're like, it just like, it's a flood of being back there. And so you were interested in kind of like in you mentioned this earlier, like how do we think of our future as an adult?
Mm-hmm.
And so can you talk about kind of how you, like the outside is very familiar, but the inside is very different. Can you talk about
Yes.
that?
Yes. So what I was thinking about in terms of the inside was kind of like what I was saying previously, how when you're young, it's going to sound like a little pessimistic, but you know, when you're young, most of the time you're like so optimistic about the future, and not not even like in a way that like, oh, you're just like, you know, Pollyanna and everything is like sunshine, but you're just not thinking, you're not thinking very deeply just because you're a child, you know? So you're not thinking very deeply about certain things like, you know, oh, as a Black American woman, what does this really mean for my future? That's like not necessarily something that you think about when you're younger. But as you get older and as you start to see certain things and as you grow and as you become involved in different things, you have different types of experiences, you start to have different types of feelings around your future and like what your future can mean. And I just found like the juxtaposition of the fortune teller, which is sort of this really sort of silly or even like frivolous thing that we play with as children, with this thought process about the different facets of an identity and like how these different facets of our identity sort of like combine to influence our futures, really. You know, I've said previously and I've thought a lot about how like a lot of where we end up in life is related to what's basically like an accident of birth. You know, are you born into a rich family? Are you born into a poor family? Are you born white? Are you born Black? Are you born Black American? You know, like, are you like, where are you? You know, where do you fall in terms of an identity? And how is that going to influence your future? And that was something that was just really, really on my mind while I was working on this project. And so I kind of wanted to use some of these identity markers on the inside of the fortune teller, because like in a way, even when we're children, we're somewhat leaning into those identity markers a bit. Like I said, it's really interesting because like I feel like the standard sort of I don't know what you would call them, genres or like sections that you put on a fortune teller, I feel like they tend to, when you're young, they tend to revolve around like where you're going to live, who you're going to marry, what type of job are you going to do.
Absolutely.
And so these are kind of like still things that we use as identifiers, like that we use to identify ourselves in a lot of ways that we use as markers of value. Because like when you're young, you want to live in the mansion, you want to have the rich husband, and like you want to have the dream job. And like, what does that really mean? You know, like a lot of that stuff is like tied up in class. Like, but when obviously like, when you're younger, you're not thinking about it that way. And so like, you know, nobody wants to get like the broke husband and be like living in the hut and like, you know, jobless, like unemployed. Like you put like quote unquote good things on the fortune teller and you put quote unquote bad things on the fortune teller. In a lot of ways, even like I said, even when we're young, a lot of that still says something about the ways that we think about identity and the ways that we think about, you know, who we're going to be when we grow up. And so as an adult, I wanted to include identity markers that we use as adults and categories that we find ourselves in as adults, and the ways that that does sort of assemble and influence our future. So it's kind of just like taking the concept and just like pushing it into adulthood. And like like I said, I also feel like adults are just more pessimistic, you know, like when you ask a child about the future, a lot of children are going to be like, I'm going to be an astronaut, or like the future's going to be great, you know. But like when you ask an adult, especially like, you know, over the past like 2-3 years, like, how do you feel about the future? They'd be like, I don't know, like the future's looking bleak, like climate change, like capitalism, racism, like it's a lot going on. Like, I'm not sure how I feel about the future. So it's just sort of like this totally radical turning point that a lot of adults go through as we go older, and we sort of like get the blinders taken off about life and identity and all of these things. And so I kind of wanted to again, I kind of wanted to express and encompass what that feels like with the project.
Yeah, and here I'll show the kind of insides. I know everything's backwards, so it's like impossible to read, but and then you kind of lift up the flap to like reveal your future. And something that really struck me about the first time I got to see your piece was you know, the title "How to Assemble a Future" makes me think about like, yeah, like what do we want to choose for our futures? How do we want to move forward? And it kind of implies this kind of like agency, which was really kind of striking. But then what I really love is how in your fortunes you also like reference luck so much.
Yes.
And you like toe that line between like agency and luck really, really beautiful. And it's a nice kind of like, for example, if you have the woman flap, try again, you'll be a woman in society that hates women, better luck next time. Right? And that like explicitly referencing that luck. Or when you open the black one, you will have a culture full of dancing, musical ability, and athletics. You also must make it past age 25. Good luck with that. And luck was just kind of woven, you know, there's that tension that you've kind of brought in between, you know, it's not so straightforward, it's not simple. And for like a really simple toy, you as an experience, it feels like there are just like many layers that you dig in slowly, which is so special. And I love how you've combined like play and also like very serious topics. So it's just really beautiful.
Yeah, I wanted it to be a little bit of like a little bit of dark humor in there, because that's something that I enjoy. And I feel like this is also something that makes people uncomfortable, because you have a lot of people that they still kind of feel like, if I just work hard and, you know, whatever, everything will be fine. And it's just like, that's not really true. Like, a lot of it does sort of include like some luck in being lucky. You know, you have some people that they're just in the wrong place at the wrong time and life gets ended. And for me, I think that was something that was really impressed upon me, especially while protesting and doing activism work, because you hear about someone, for example, like John Crawford, who was shot in a Walmart while doing nothing wrong. He's talking on a cell phone. He's holding a BB gun. It's not even a real gun. It's a BB gun. He's actually in an open carry state. He's actually in a Walmart where they do sell guns. So it could have even been if it even was a real gun, like it could have been a gun that he wanted to purchase. Like he literally was just like, it was like wrong place, wrong time. Somebody called 911. The person that called 911 even said like, it could be a toy. Like there were so many moving parts to that scenario that resulted in this man's death, you know? And I feel like adults try to like find logical meaning, like, oh, well, it had to be this, or it had to be that, or, you know, if he was doing this, or if he was doing that. And I've seen people try to have these conversations, and it's just like, no, like, that's not how it works. Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, like, this was absolutely related to racism. It was a racist act. And then you see people that say stuff like, well, I know somebody that went shopping in that Walmart and picked up a BB gun, and they're black and they were totally fine. And it's like, they were lucky. Like, there's like an element of luck involved. There's an element of, again, like, who's there, who's making the call, who's watching. Again, so many moving parts that make up moments in our lives that can totally change our lives. You know, that can be the difference even between life and death. And so I wanted to include the element of chance, because I also feel like that's a part of even the fortune teller, you know, telling your fortunes and things like that. There's always an element of chance there, almost like a lottery. You know, like you go and you play the numbers, like there's an element of chance in that. And I sort of wanted to toy around with that idea as well. Like nothing is like set. There's like an element of chance to it all.
Yeah. Well, it is fantastic. We're really excited for people to experience it. Such a beautiful compliment to the video, and I feel like they kind of like experiencing together. You really do think about each in in a deeper, cooler way. So thank you so, so much for doing
Yes,
this.
thank you. No, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really glad. Like I said, it's amazing how it, you know, you could even say like it's amazing how it ended up working out. Like there was even an element of like chance and coincidence to that, because like I've been sort of ruminating on this idea around and playing around with it, and it kind of like just so happened to end up really working out for what you guys needed. So I'm really, really, really excited about the piece, and
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing like the finished product myself, like having one.
Yeah, well, they will come in the mail so soon. So all right. Well, yeah, so they'll we'll be mailing them out. The kind of ticket sales close on the 15th, and then we'll be mailing them out on the 18th, and kind of take a couple days to get to people and everything. Yeah, but it will kind of come in a nice envelope, and you can assemble your own art by Seren, which is so cool. All right. Thanks again for chatting.
No problem. Thank you for having me. Thank you everybody for watching. I saw you guys' comments and stuff down there. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.